Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of the Colony Administration Building, watching the morning sun rise over the golden wheat fields of New Denver. The sight never got old, even after 15 years as the colony administrator. 50,000 humans had made this world their home, and they had built something beautiful here on Kepler 442b. The rolling hills stretched as far as the eye could see, covered in crops that fed not just the colony, but 3 other human settlements. In nearby systems, the colonists had learned to work with the planet instead of against it. The native soil organisms actually helped their earth crops grow better, creating a partnership between human agriculture and alien biology that amazed the scientists back home. Children ran through the streets of New Denver town playing games. Their parents had played back on Earth. The sound of their laughter mixed with the hum of farming equipment and the chatter of adults going about their daily work. Captain Lisa Martinez walked into Jake's office without knocking, something she only did when there was trouble. Her face was tight with worry, and she carried a data pad that she thrust toward him immediately. Lisa had been the head of colony defense for 8 years, and Jake had never seen her look this concerned. "Jake, we have a problem," she said, pointing at the sensor readings on the pad. 3 ships just dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of our system. They're big, Jake. Bigger than anything we've ever seen. Jake took the pad and studied the readings. The ships were massive, each one larger than the entire New Denver spaceport. Their design was unfamiliar, with sharp angles and what looked like heavy weapons mounted along their hulls. The energy signatures were off the charts. "Have they tried to communicate?" Jake asked, though he could already guess the answer from Lisa's expression. "Nothing yet," Lisa replied. "But their course is directly toward our planet. They'll be here in 6 hours." Jake thought quickly. New Denver had a small defense fleet, but it was designed to handle pirates and smugglers, not military warships. The colony's shields could protect the main settlement from minor attacks, but these ships looked like they could level entire continents. "Contact Earth immediately," Jake ordered. "Get me a direct line to Colonial Command, and patch me through to Ben Taylor in Communications. We need to let everyone know what's happening." Ben Taylor was already working when Jake reached the communications center. The young officer had set up multiple broadcast channels, creating links not just to Earth, but to every human colony in the sector. If something was about to happen to New Denver, the rest of humanity would witness it. "Sir, I've got live feeds going to 47 worlds," Ben reported. "Whatever happens here, everyone will see it in real time." Jake nodded grimly. If these were hostile aliens, the rest of humanity needed to know about it. The colony had always been proud of its peaceful relationship with its alien neighbors. But these ships didn't belong to any species they had dealt with before. The alien ships moved steadily closer throughout the morning. As they approached, their true size became clear. Each vessel was over 2 kilometers long, bristling with weapons that could destroy a moon. The colonists gathered in the town square, looking up at the sky with growing fear. At noon, the ships finally sent a message. Jake listened to the translation with growing horror. The aliens identified themselves as the Zephyrian Imperial Fleet. Their leader, Admiral Sektar, declared that humans had built their colony on sacred Zephyrian burial grounds. The colonists had 30 minutes to evacuate the planet completely, or face the consequences. Jake tried to reason with them through the communication channel. He explained that the colony had been established legally, with full surveys showing no signs of previous habitation. The human settlers had spent 15 years improving the planet's environment, not damaging it. He offered to relocate any burial sites or to find a compromise that would respect Zephyrian religious beliefs. Admiral Sektar's response was cold and final. "Your species is young and ignorant," the alien commander said through the translator. You do not understand the sacred nature of this world. Your presence here is an insult that cannot be tolerated. You have 20 minutes remaining." Jake looked around the town square at the faces of his people. These weren't soldiers or explorers. They were farmers, teachers, shopkeepers, and children. They had built homes here, raised families, and created a community. This was their world now, and they had nowhere else to go. "We can't evacuate 50,000 people in 20 minutes. Jake said into his communicator, broadcasting to the Zephyrian ships and to every human world watching. "We need time. Our children, our elderly, our families, they can't just disappear. Your time is over." Admiral Sektar replied. The first energy beam struck the northern edge of New Denver town without warning. The blast vaporized 3 city blocks instantly, turning homes and businesses into superheated plasma. The ground shook, and screams filled the air as people ran in panic. Jake watched in horror as the school where his own daughter taught was reduced to glowing slag. More beams followed, methodically destroying the colony piece by piece. The aliens targeted civilian areas first: the hospital, the schools, the residential districts. It was clear they weren't trying to force an evacuation. They were committing murder on a massive scale. Jake ran through the burning streets, trying to help coordinate evacuations, even as the bombardment continued. He passed Lisa Martinez, organizing the colony's meager defenses, though everyone knew their weapons were useless against ships of that size. He saw Ben Taylor still at his post, maintaining the broadcast link even as the communications building shook around him. Got families huddled together in basements and shelters that offered no real protection against the alien weapons. Parents held their children close, whispering reassurances they didn't believe themselves. The sky burned orange and red as the atmosphere itself seemed to catch fire. As the bombardment reached the town center, Jake found himself standing in what had been the colony's main plaza. The fountain where children had played that morning was now a crater filled with molten metal. The statue commemorating the colony's founding lay in pieces, its bronze surface twisted by impossible heat. Jake activated his personal communicator one last time, knowing that Ben was still broadcasting to the human worlds. His voice was calm despite the chaos around him, speaking directly to his species across the galaxy. "This is Jake Morrison, administrator of New Denver Colony," he said, looking directly into the camera Ben had set up. 50,000 innocent people are dying here today for no reason except that we dared to build a home among the stars. Remember this moment. Remember what they did to us. Remember that we tried to find peace, but they chose war. Justice will come for those responsible. Humanity will remember." The final energy beam struck the administration building, and the broadcast went dark. New Denver Colony was gone. Ambassador Helen Walsh had watched the New Denver broadcast from her office on Concordia Prime, the massive space station that served as the center of galactic government. The images of burning homes and dying families were still fresh in her mind 3 days later as she walked through the corridors toward the emergency council session she had demanded. Other species representatives moved past her with careful indifference, their alien faces showing no emotion about what had happened to her people. The Galactic Council chamber was a marvel of engineering, a vast spherical room where hundreds of species could meet in their preferred environments. The ethereals floated in their energy fields near the top of the chamber, while water-breathing species occupied the lower levels behind transparent barriers. Helen stood at the human podium, one of the smaller ones near the middle section, designed for species that breathed oxygen and walked on 2 legs. Council. Speaker Vorthak of the Ethereal Collective called the session to order with a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. The ancient being had overseen galactic politics for over 3 centuries, and Helen could see in its glowing form the same bored patience it showed for all matters involving younger species. The human representative has requested this emergency session, Vorthak announced to the assembled delegates. We shall hear her concerns, though we note that territorial disputes between developing species rarely require council intervention. Helen felt her anger rise at the casual dismissal, but she kept her voice steady as she began to speak. Honored delegates, 3 days ago, the galaxy witnessed the systematic murder of 50,000 human civilians on New Denver Colony. This was not a territorial dispute. This was genocide, committed against defenseless families by the Zephyrian Imperial Fleet. She activated the holographic display above her podium, showing images from Ben Taylor's final broadcast. The chamber, filled with scenes of the bombardment, of families running through burning streets, of children crying for parents who would never answer. Some of the delegates looked away, but most watched with the detached interest they might show for a nature. Documentary. Representative Korthik of the Zephyrian Empire rose from his position across the chamber. The reptilian being was twice Helen's height, with scales that shifted color as he spoke. His voice carried the authority of one of the galaxy's most powerful military forces. The human shows images of regrettable but necessary action, Korthik declared. The world they call New Denver contains the sacred burial grounds of our ancestors, sites that have been holy to the Zephyrian people for 10,000 years. The humans were warned of this violation and refused to leave. A forced our hand. With their stubbornness, Helen had expected this response and was ready with her reply. We surveyed that world for 5 years before establishing the colony. Our archaeologists found no evidence of burial sites, no traces of previous habitation. If these sites exist, why weren't they marked or protected? Why weren't we told about them when we first requested permission to settle there? You're primitive. Scanning methods could not detect the spiritual essence of our ancestors, Korthik replied smoothly. The very presence of your farmers and their machines was an insult that demanded correction. We acted with appropriate force to defend what is sacred. Several delegates murmured agreement, and Helen realized with growing horror that many of them actually supported what the Zephyrians had done. These were beings who had supposedly evolved beyond the brutality of their primitive ancestors. Yet they sat calmly discussing the murder of children, as if it were a minor administrative matter. Trade. Representative Velshan of the Merchant Union spoke next, his multiple arms gesturing as he addressed the chamber. While the loss of life is unfortunate, we must consider the broader economic implications. The Zephyrian Empire controls 17 major trade routes and provides security for 46 systems. The human colonies represent a market of perhaps 200 billion individuals, but they produce little that cannot be obtained elsewhere. From a practical standpoint, maintaining positive relations with the Zephyrians serves the greater good. Helen stared at the alien in disbelief. He was literally putting a price on human lives, calculating whether 50,000 deaths were worth the cost of offending a major trading partner. Around the chamber, other delegates were nodding thoughtfully, as if this were a reasonable point of view. You're talking about my people as if we're livestock, Helen said, her voice rising despite her efforts to stay calm. 50,000 human beings were murdered in cold blood while the entire galaxy watched. If we let this pass without consequence, what message does that send? That any powerful species can commit genocide as long as they claim religious justification. Council. Speaker Vorthak's energy field pulsed with what Helen had learned to recognize as mild irritation. Young human, you speak as if this is the first time such events have occurred. The galaxy is vast and ancient, and conflicts between species are as natural as the formation of stars. The ethereal collective has observed the rise and fall of countless civilizations over the millennia. Those who survive learn to adapt to the realities of cosmic existence. The casual dismissal of her people's suffering hit Helen like a physical blow. She looked around the chamber at beings she had once respected, species that claimed to represent the highest ideals of galactic civilization. Now she saw them for what they really were, cowards who enabled monsters because it was convenient. For them. Then humanity will remember that when our own time comes, Helen said quietly. We came to the stars hoping to join a community of civilized beings. Instead, we found a collection of cowards who stand by and watch while innocents die. The Zephyrians murdered 50,000 people, and you call it natural. When humanity responds to this outrage, we'll remember who stood with us and who looked the other way. The session ended without any formal action, exactly as Helen had expected. The various delegates filed out of the chamber, already moving on to other business. Some of them probably felt bad about what had happened to New Denver, but not bad enough to actually do anything about it. Helen made her way back to her office and opened a secure communication channel to Earth. President Danny Johnson appeared. On her screen, his face showing the strain of the past few days. Behind him, she could see advisors and military officials moving with urgent purpose. How did it go? Johnson asked, though his expression suggested he already knew the answer. Exactly as we feared, Helen replied. They're not going to help. U.S. Worse than that, most of them think the Zephyrians were justified. Or on our own, Danny. The president nodded slowly, and Helen could see him making the decision that would change everything. Ben will handle this ourselves. Come home, Helen. It's time for humanity to learn some hard lessons about our place in this galaxy. As Helen began packing her belongings, she thought about Jake Morrison's final words from New Denver. Justice would come for those responsible, he had promised. The galaxy might have forgotten that promise already, but humanity would not. 5 years had passed since the New Denver massacre, and the galaxy had moved on to other concerns. The Zephyrian Empire continued its expansion, absorbing 2 more star systems from weaker species who could not resist their military might. The Galactic Council held its regular sessions on Concordia Prime, debating trade regulations and territorial boundaries, while carefully avoiding any mention of the human colony that had been destroyed. Most alien observers believed humanity had learned its place in the cosmic order. Human colonies had withdrawn from galactic politics, canceling trade agreements and ending cultural exchange programs. The few human ships seen in neutral space moved quietly and avoided contact with other species. It seemed the young race had accepted that they were too weak to challenge the established powers. What the galaxy did not see was the unprecedented mobilization happening within human space. Every human world had committed resources to Project Retribution, a massive undertaking that touched every aspect of human civilization. On Earth, President Danny Johnson had been re-elected twice on the promise that New Denver would not be forgotten, and that humanity would never again be helpless in the face of aggression. Dr. Rachel Stone stood in the main laboratory of the Advanced Defense Research Institute, watching her teams work around the clock on technologies that would have seemed impossible just 5 years earlier. The massacre had changed everything about how humans approached science and engineering. Where once they had focused on peaceful exploration and colonization, now every breakthrough was measured against a single question. Would this help protect human lives from alien attack? Tony, show me the latest test results, Rachel called to engineer Tony Rodriguez, who was working at a console surrounded by holographic displays of shield generators and power systems. Tony looked up from his work, his face showing the exhaustion that had become common among the project staff. The new shields held up against everything we could throw at them. Dr. Stone, we hit them with energy weapons copied from captured Zephyrian technology, and the shields absorbed 97% of the impact. A colony protected by these systems could survive a direct bombardment for hours instead of minutes. Rachel nodded with satisfaction. The shield technology was based on principles reverse-engineered from alien devices that human intelligence operatives had acquired through methods the government preferred not to discuss in detail. Every major alien technology had been studied, analyzed, and improved upon by human scientists who worked with a desperation that their alien counterparts could not match. Commander Susan Miller walked through the hidden shipyards of Wolf Station, located in a star system that did not appear on any galactic navigation charts. The facility had been built in complete secrecy over the past 4 years, using resources quietly diverted from dozens of human worlds. The ships being constructed here would have shocked any alien observer who believed humans were still using primitive chemical rockets and basic energy weapons. The centerpiece of the fleet was the battleship New Denver's Vengeance, a vessel that incorporated every technological breakthrough human scientists had achieved since the massacre. Its hull was composed of materials that could absorb and redistribute energy weapon impacts, while its armament included weapons systems that could penetrate any known alien shielding technology. "How many ships will be ready for the operation?" Susan asked her chief engineer, Lieutenant Colonel Pete Barnes, as they walked past the construction bays where dozens of vessels were taking shape. 47 battle-ready ships within 2 months, Pete replied, consulting his datapad. Another 63 will be completed over the following 6 months. The Zephyrians won't know what hit them. Susan smiled grimly as she looked at the ships that would carry humanity's answer to New Denver. Each vessel was named after one of the human colonies, with the largest and most powerful bearing the names of settlements that had been attacked or threatened by alien aggression. The fleet represented more than just military power. It was a statement that humanity would no longer accept the role of victim. Meanwhile, intelligence operative Ryan Clark had spent these 5 years becoming someone else entirely. His official records showed him as a minor trade representative for a small human corporation. But his real work involved infiltrating alien intelligence networks and gathering information that would be crucial for the coming operation. He had learned to speak 17 alien languages fluently and had developed contacts within the governments of 12 different species. Ryan sat in a bar on the neutral trading station Deep Space 7, nursing a drink while listening to 2 Zephyrian military officers discussed their fleet positions. The reptilian aliens were drunk on fermented kelp juice and talking more freely than they should have, providing details about ship movements and defensive positions that would have cost human intelligence operatives their lives to obtain through other means. The 4th Fleet is being redeployed to the Rigel sector next month, one of the officers was saying to his companion. Admiral Sektar wants to secure those mining worlds before the ethereals can claim them. The humans in that area have already evacuated, so there should be no resistance. Ryan made a mental note of the information while maintaining his cover as a bored businessman. The Zephyrian Empire had grown overconfident in their dominance, assuming that their victory at New Denver had broken human resistance permanently. They had no idea that every ship movement, every strategic decision, and every military weakness was being cataloged by human intelligence operatives who had learned to move invisibly through alien society. Back on Earth, Dr. Amanda Foster worked in a laboratory buried 3 kilometers beneath the Antarctic ice sheet, developing the technologies that would give humanity its greatest advantage in the coming conflict. Her breakthrough discoveries in quantum communications and faster-than-light travel represented advances that no other galactic species had achieved, technologies that would allow human forces to coordinate their actions across vast distances with perfect precision. The Quantum Entanglement Network is ready for full deployment. Amanda reported to the Secure Council meeting where Earth's leaders planned humanity's response to the massacre. Every human military unit will be able to communicate instantaneously with every other unit, regardless of distance. We can coordinate attacks across multiple star systems simultaneously. President Johnson listened to the reports from his military and scientific advisors with the patience of a man who had spent 5 years preparing for this moment. The massacre at New Denver had taught humanity that the galaxy was not the civilized community they had hoped to join, but rather a savage place where only the strong survived. If humanity wanted to protect their colonies and their people, they would need to become stronger than anyone who might threaten them. The Zephyrian Empire continued their expansion, confident that their display of power at New Denver had established their dominance over the younger species. They failed to notice the subtle changes happening in human territory, the quiet preparations that would soon transform the balance of power in the galaxy. Admiral Sektar, now promoted to Supreme Fleet Commander, planned new conquests, while remaining completely unaware that his every move was being watched and recorded by the species he believed he had already defeated. The anniversary of New Denver was approaching, and humanity was almost ready to break their silence. President Danny Johnson stood in the broadcast studio deep beneath the Earth's surface, preparing to address not just humanity, but the entire galaxy. 5 years of careful preparation had led to this moment, and the weight of 50,000 dead. Colonists rested on his shoulders as he looked into the camera that would carry his words across countless star systems. Behind him, technicians made final adjustments to the quantum transmission array that Dr. Amanda Foster had perfected, a system that would hijack every major communication network in known space. The anniversary of New Denver had arrived, and humanity's silence was about to end in the most dramatic way possible. Johnson had aged during his years in office, his hair now completely gray, and his face marked by the burden of leading a species that had learned hard truths about their place in the universe. Today, he would announce that humanity was ready to claim a new place among the stars. "Begin transmission," Johnson ordered, and across the galaxy, routine broadcasts suddenly cut to black before displaying the image of Earth's president. On Concordia Prime, Council Speaker Vorthek was addressing a session about mining rights when the screens around the chamber flickered and changed. On Zephyrian Prime, Admiral Sektar was reviewing invasion plans when his holographic displays were replaced by the face of a human leader he had assumed was cowering in fear. "Citizens of the galaxy," Johnson began, his voice reaching billions of beings across hundreds of worlds simultaneously. 5 years ago, you watched as 50,000 innocent human beings were murdered on New Denver Colony. You saw families burned alive, children crying for parents who would never answer, and an entire civilization destroyed because we dared to build homes among the stars. The transmission showed footage from Ben Taylor's final broadcast, images that many alien species had tried to forget. The burning buildings, the desperate evacuations, and Jake Morrison's final words played across every screen in galactic space, forcing the universe to remember what they had chosen to ignore. The Galactic Council called this a territorial dispute. Johnson continued, his voice growing harder. They said it was natural that weaker species must accept the dominance of the strong. They told us to learn our place in the cosmic order. Today, we show you what we have learned. The image changed to display detailed records of Zephyrian war crimes spanning over a century. Ryan Clark's intelligence network had compiled evidence of 6 complete species extinctions, dozens of colony massacres, and systematic campaigns of terror that the Zephyrian Empire had used to maintain their dominance. Each atrocity was documented with dates, locations, and casualty figures that painted a picture of organized genocide on a galactic scale. These are not isolated incidents, Johnson declared as the evidence scrolled across screens throughout known space. This is a pattern of behavior by a criminal empire that has used terror and murder to expand their territory, while the so-called civilized galaxy looked the other way. We formally charge the Zephyrian Empire with crimes against sentient life and demand their immediate surrender for trial. On Concordia Prime, Council Speaker Vorthak's energy field flickered with what observers recognized as extreme agitation. The ancient being had never been challenged so directly by a species as young as humanity, and the public nature of the accusation made it impossible to dismiss with diplomatic language. The human president oversteps his authority, Vorthik. Broadcast on emergency channels. The Galactic Council is the proper forum for such disputes, and we do not recognize unilateral demands from individual species. Johnson's response was immediate and devastating. We came to your Council 5 years ago seeking justice and found only cowards who enable murderers. Therefore, humanity formally withdraws from all galactic treaties and institutions. We will no longer seek permission from beings who have proven themselves morally bankrupt. The age of human deference to galactic authority is over. The transmission ended, leaving the galaxy in stunned silence for exactly 12 minutes. Then humanity revealed what they had built during their years of apparent weakness. Admiral Kate Sullivan commanded the human defense fleet from the bridge of the battleship Earth's Promise, watching as her task force dropped out of hyperspace simultaneously at 12 different locations across Zephyrian territory. The quantum communication network allowed perfect coordination between all human forces, something no other species had ever achieved on such a scale. All units report ready for synchronized attack, Lieutenant Commander Paul Garcia announced. From the communication station, target locks confirmed on all Zephyrian military installations. Kate looked at the tactical display showing Zephyrian bases, shipyards, and fleet positions that had been identified through 5 years of intelligence gathering. Each target had been chosen for maximum military impact while minimizing civilian casualties, demonstrating that humanity sought justice rather than revenge. Execute Operation Retribution, Kate commanded, and across 12 star systems, human warships opened fire with weapons that shocked the galaxy with their advanced technology. The Zephyrian military base at Kronos 7 was the first to fall, its supposedly impregnable shields collapsing under the focused fire of 3 human cruisers. The base commander, General Victor, had just enough time to send a panic distress signal before his facility was reduced to molten slag. Similar scenes played out across Zephyrian space as humanity demonstrated that they had become a military power capable of challenging the galaxy's strongest empire. The most significant engagement occurred in the Vega 7 system, where the Zephyrian Third Fleet was conducting training exercises under the command of Admiral Mordok, Sektar's chosen successor. The alien force consisted of 15 heavy battleships and 30 escort vessels, a formation that could conquer entire star systems. They were completely unprepared for the appearance of Captain Eric Thompson's task force, led by the massive battleship New Denver's Vengeance. Zephyrian vessels, this is Captain Thompson of the Human Defense Fleet. Eric broadcast on all frequencies as his ships emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation. You are ordered to surrender immediately for trial as war criminals. Any resistance will be met with overwhelming force. Admiral Mordok's response was predictably arrogant. Humans dare to threaten the Imperial fleet? Your pathetic species should have learned their place at New Denver. We will finish what Admiral Sektar began. The battle that followed was broadcast. Leave across human space, allowing every human colony to witness their species' transformation from victims to warriors. The engagement lasted only 18 minutes, but it demonstrated beyond any doubt that humanity had surpassed their former oppressors in every aspect of military, technology, and tactics. The human ships moved with coordinated precision that no alien force had ever displayed. Their quantum communication system allowing instantaneous tactical adjustments across the entire fleet. Their weapons penetrated Zephyrian shields like they were made of paper, while their own defensive systems absorbed enemy fire with casual ease. When the New Denver's Vengeance destroyed Admiral Mordok's flagship with a single concentrated volley, the remaining Zephyrian vessels attempted to flee. None of them escaped the human pursuit ships. which demonstrated faster-than-light capabilities that exceeded anything in the Galactic database. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as reports flooded in from all 12 attack sites. Humanity had revealed themselves as a major military power in a single, coordinated strike that crippled the Zephyrian Empire's ability to project force. The species that had been dismissed as primitive newcomers had become the dominant military force in their region of space overnight. President Johnson's final transmission of the day was brief, but carried across every communication network in known space. The massacre at New Denver demanded justice, and justice has begun. Any species that threatens human colonies will face the same response. The galaxy can no longer ignore us, and we will no longer tolerate those who prey upon them. Innocent. Admiral Sektar sat in chains aboard the human transport ship, justice delivered, staring through the viewport at the stars he had once ruled with absolute authority. The reptilian commander, who had ordered the destruction of New Denver Colony, now found himself a prisoner, captured during a daring raid on the Zephyrian capital by Colonel Mike Davis and his Special Forces team. The operation had been planned with the same meticulous precision that characterized all human military actions since the massacre, and Sektar's capture had taken less than 30 minutes, despite the supposedly impregnable defenses of his command. Center, the Zephyrian Empire, was crumbling from within as subject species that had suffered under their rule for centuries saw humanity's example and rose up in rebellion. The Altarian bird people had seized control of their home system within days of the human attacks, while the crystalline Vorthan had shattered their Zephyrian overseers and declared independence. Dozens of oppressed races were following humanity's lead, realizing that the mighty empire that had terrorized them for so long was not invincible after all. Colonel Davis walked into the holding area where Sektar waited for transport to Earth, his face showing no emotion as he looked at the alien, who had become the symbol of everything humanity opposed. The human officer had lost his own brother in the New Denver attack, but his expression remained professional as he addressed the former admiral. "You'll be interested to know that your empire has lost 14 systems in the past month," Davis said calmly. "The species you enslaved are learning that freedom is possible when tyrants are shown to be weak. Your legacy will be the liberation of everyone you oppressed." Sektar's scales shifted to dark red, indicating the rage he felt at being lectured by what he still considered an inferior species. "You think you have won something, human, but you have only doomed your kind. Other powers will see your aggression and unite against you. A galaxy will not tolerate upstart species that upset the natural order." Davis smiled without humor as he looked at the defeated alien. The natural order was 50,000 innocent people being murdered while the galaxy watched and did nothing. "We're bringing a new order, one where justice matters more than convenience." On Earth, the New Denver Tribunal had been established in a gleaming courthouse built specifically for the trials of Zephyrian war criminals. The proceedings were broadcast, lived to every world in human space, and transmitted to any alien species willing to receive them, creating the most watched legal proceedings in galactic history. Judge Patricia Wells, formerly of the Earth Supreme Court, presided over trials that would set precedents for interspecies justice that had never existed before. The courthouse itself was a work of art, designed to represent humanity's commitment to fair legal process even for their enemies. The walls were lined with the names of every victim of Zephyrian aggression, while the ceiling showed a holographic display of stars representing all the worlds that had suffered under the empires. Rule. At the center of the main courtroom stood a memorial flame that burned continuously for the 50,000 dead of New Denver Colony. Prosecutor Lavra Kim presented evidence gathered by Ryan Clark's intelligence network, documenting centuries of systematic atrocities committed by the Zephyrian military. Each case was presented with meticulous attention to legal procedure, demonstrating that humanity sought justice through law rather than revenge through violence. The trials included testimony from survivors of dozens of species, many speaking publicly about their suffering for the first time in their lives. Admiral Sektar's trial became the focal point of galactic attention as he faced charges for ordering the New Denver Massacre and 17 other colony destructions. Defense attorney Mark Thompson, appointed by the court to ensure fair representation, argued that his client had acted according to the laws and customs of his own species. The prosecution's response was devastating in its simplicity. The defendant claims he was following orders and cultural imperatives, Prosecutor Kim stated during her closing argument. But the evidence shows a pattern of deliberate targeting of civilian populations, systematic destruction of non-military targets, and the use of terror as a weapon of conquest. These are not the actions of a soldier following lawful orders. These are the actions of a war criminal who used his authority to commit genocide. The verdict was unanimous among the panel of human judges who had been selected from Earth's most respected legal minds. Admiral Sektar was found guilty on all charges and sentenced to life imprisonment, to be served in a facility where he would spend his remaining years contemplating the consequences of his actions. The sentence was broadcast across the galaxy, serving notice that humanity would hold accountable those who committed atrocities against innocent populations. Meanwhile, Ambassador Helen Walsh found herself in an entirely different position than she had occupied 5 years earlier. The Galactic Council chambers on Concordia Prime were nearly empty as species after species withdrew from an institution they now saw as irrelevant and morally bankrupt. The ancient council speaker Vorthak floated alone in the center of the vast chamber, his energy field dim with what observers recognized as despair. "The humans have destroyed everything we built over millennia," Vorthak said to the few remaining delegates. "They show no respect for established authority or traditional diplomatic procedures. Their actions threaten the stability of galactic civilization." Helen smiled as she listened to the being who had dismissed her people's suffering as natural and unavoidable. "Speaker Vorthak, you had your chance to provide justice through your council. When you failed, humanity created our own path. The Free Species Alliance now includes 63 member worlds, all committed to defending the innocent against aggression. Your old order is finished because it was built on the suffering of those too weak to resist." The Free Species Alliance had grown beyond humanity's wildest expectations, as species after species requested membership in an organization that promised mutual defense and equal representation. Former Zephyrian subjects brought technological knowledge and resources, while species that had suffered under other galactic powers offered intelligence and strategic positions. The Alliance fleet had become the dominant military force in 3 major star sectors, with more species joining every month. President Johnson, now in his final term, stood once again on the observation deck of New Denver Colony, rebuilt and thriving 10 years after its destruction. The memorial to the 50,000 victims occupied the center of the new town square, but around it grew a community that represented the best of human values. Children played in parks where families had once died, while settlers from dozens of species worked together to build something better than what had existed before. The memorial itself was simple but powerful, a black stone wall inscribed with every name of every person who had died in the massacre. At its base, an eternal flame burned beside words that had become the motto of the Free Species Alliance. They died as colonists, but they live on as the foundation of galactic justice. Elder Statesman Johnson addressed the representatives from over 100 species who had gathered for the 10th anniversary commemoration, his voice carrying the wisdom of a leader who had guided his people through their darkest hour and into a new age of galactic influence. 10 years ago, we learned that the galaxy was not the civilized community we hoped to join, he said, looking out over the diverse crowd of beings who now called themselves allies of humanity. But from tragedy came purpose, and from our pain came the determination to ensure that no peaceful species would ever again face extinction while the galaxy looked away. We built something better from the ashes of New Denver, and we will continue building until justice is the rule rather than the exception among the stars. The galaxy had learned that humanity was no longer asking for permission to exist among the stars. They had taken their place as guardians of justice, and they would never again allow the strong to prey upon the weak while others watched in silence.